This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. As we roar into summer 2023, the first day of June, reaching back, two important guests. First, Robert Cialdini. Needs no introduction. You've seen his book, Influence, I'm sure. And second, one of those great trading coach pros, Brett Steenbarger. Also, for those in the trading world, needs no introduction. Without any further delay, let's jump right into two guests that will get you thinking about the mind. And if they don't get you thinking about the mind, there's something wrong with yours. I hope you enjoy. My guest today is a repeat guest, but a very special repeat guest. One of the most important authors alive today because of one great book. He's got a couple books, but his first great book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, which is what we talk today. That author, that man is Robert Cialdini. Unless you have been kind of lost at sea for many years, then you might not know about Robert. But for those that have something to do with business, entrepreneurship, psychology, almost any aspect of the human condition, this book, Influence, by Robert Cialdini, is a must-have. This is the guidebook, the understanding of getting people to yes, understanding why they say no. The whole process. It is human interaction, successful human interaction. I mean, some of the main topics that we talk about, the main topics of his book, reciprocity, commitment, consistency, social proof, liking, authority, scarcity. Yeah, these might sound like buzzwords, but they're not. This is how you get things done with other human beings. This is how you communicate. This is how you interact. I am so fortunate to have the brilliant minds on this podcast. Without any further delay, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Robert Cialdini. It's really interesting to look at your career, and I want to start at some early stuff. But just out of the gate, a big picture question. You've written a book, several now. The one we're going to talk about today, Influence, the new edition. This is a book that has caught fire for a long time. A long time. How has this changed your life?
Here's the most notable change, Michael. People can pronounce my name now.
There you go, right?
It used to be all forms of what it is. It's Cialdini now, and most people seem to be able to articulate it right off the bat. That tells me there's some reach for the book.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. And it's interesting, too, that I feel like when I first saw it, I don't know how many years ago, I grasped some of it. But as I get older, it gets deeper and deeper in your pores. There's a depth issue going on that I think some people, even though you've written it in a non-academic way, there's still kind of an issue of getting over the humps, so to speak. But then when you get it and the light bulb goes off, it's like you can't help but look at the world the way that you do.
Well, that's very gratifying to hear. I think part of it may have to do with the fact that as we move ahead in time, new experiences, new examples, even new phenomena emerge that didn't exist before, but that these universal principles of influence still describe and help us understand. What we may be recognizing is that oh, yeah, this works here in this other thing that I've now encountered that I hadn't encountered before. A classic example is the internet. When I first wrote Influence, there was no internet, but it's now called the Bible of internet commerce. It didn't exist before. But if we really have principles that are of universal impact, that are part of the human condition, then when new experiences, new phenomena come along, we can see a resonance to them.
Let me take you back in time. You affectionately call yourself, I've seen you use the term, a patsy, that at various points in your career, early on in life, whatnot, that you would, I don't want to say fall for, but you were open to suggestion, a sales pitch or whatnot, or you appreciated these sales pitches. I would have to say maybe one of the reasons it was hard for me to originally grasp your work is I'm the opposite. So I was too skeptical. So I would just turn everything off. But take me back into maybe some early moments where you started to kind of have the aha moment before you even got into the research, where you started to feel like, what is this? What's going on? Was there an early original moment? Was there one thing that kicked off your research?
There was one class of things, and it does have to do with this self description as a pushover or a sucker. I would often find myself in an unwanted possession of things that I had bought from somebody who came to my door, some sales operator, somebody who came and wanted me to donate to a cause I hadn't even heard of, and so on. And I would do these things, or I would buy subscriptions to magazines I wasn't really interested in. And I remember thinking to myself, wait a minute, there's something here other than the merits of the offer that got me to say yes to these requests. It must be the way that the requests were presented to me. It must be something about the psychology of delivering this offer and its merits that hooked me. Isn't that interesting? This would be worthy of study.
How old were you at that moment in time, Bob, roughly?
I was in college.
Okay, so like 21, 22.
Yeah, a sophomore, junior in college. And I had just had enough of these experiences that it did occur to me that in the context of the psychology classes I was taking, there may be explanations for me owning a 2-year subscription to Beekeeper's Digest, and I don't keep bees. There must be something that this salesperson did that engaged a feature of me that is so primitive, so fundamental, that I was inclined to say yes because of the way he presented it to me. His likability or his credibility or something like that must have done it.
What was your research process at that moment? I mean, did you have one in the sense that, okay, you're having this aha moment, this light bulb moment, something's going on. Did you talk to other people? How did you try to approach finding out more information?
It turns out there was a fortunate confluence of events. At the time, I was scheduled to go on to graduate school in animal behavior. I was a research assistant for a faculty member who studied animal interactions. In fact, my first publication was about animal behavior. I was going to go to graduate school to study something called ethology, the study of animals in their natural environments. But I had a mad crush on Marilyn Rapinski at the time, who was taking a social psychology course. There was an empty desk next to her. We were at a point in our relationship where we wanted to be together at all times. So I would follow along after her, and I sat in this psychology, this social psychology class, the study of everyday human behavior. And I started to see where these dynamics and these tendencies might play in to the decision to say yes to somebody who is offering you something you don't really want, but has crafted the offering and the description of it and the proposal in such a way that they've engaged something very fundamental. So, for example, if somebody gives us something first, does us a nice favor, and then asks us for something in return, we might say yes to whatever that is, even though we don't want it, but because we owe that person something, or because we like that person a lot, or because he's told us that a lot of other people just like us have made this choice and found it to be very successful for us. So there are all these other reasons besides the merit of the thing that could hook us and get us to move in that direction.
If I keep you at that early stage again, though, you realized once you got into this fully, no one else had yet done the work, so to speak.
Not in a systematic way, no.
That must have been a fun feeling.
There was enthusiasm, there was elation, and there was trepidation. Because if you're going into something new, there's a lot of opportunity for falling on your face because nobody's been there. There are no guidelines, there are no guardrails. You can make a choice that turns out not to be a good one. At the same time, if nobody has really done this in a systematic way, and I'm thinking that I could do that, if it turns out that really is, as you say, a groundbreaking opportunity, then it was something that had me definitely enthusiastic.
In my world of investments and whatnot, I've had a chance to fall into some areas, blue ocean areas where people have not touched. And it's such a nice feeling, changes your life in the sense that you're like, wow, I am so energized. I am going to go this path. And you chose one where, I mean, it just doesn't ever get dull. The examples never stop. It's just so intertwined in our life. It's your life now too. It's just an amazing feeling.
I count myself a fortunate man to have decided to study the persuasion and social influence process, because who isn't interested in that? Everybody wants to become more persuasive, or at least to know enough to guard themselves against people who try to persuade them in unwelcome or undue ways. It seems to me I had both sides of the aisle there when it comes to persuasion. And it turned out that, yeah, a lot of people are interested in knowing in some sort of a compendium, which I tried to make Influence, the book Influence, compendium of what we know scientifically about how and why people say yes.
Let me keep you back in time a little bit. I found the process, and perhaps there's some interesting nugget you might want to share, but the process, you start down this journey and where you started to search for how salespeople, so to speak, do this. You kind of went behind the scenes. Could I call you at one point in time an investigative reporter almost?
You could even call me a spy.
Ooh, yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Give me some early examples. Explain to the audience what I'm talking about and how you approach this. Because here you are, you're like, okay, I see something, but how do I investigate this? Where do I start? And you laid out a plan.
It seemed to me that the people who really knew what worked in naturally occurring sales situations or management situations or fundraising situations, lobbying, and whatever the influence domain might be, were those people themselves. They kept that information proprietary very often because they didn't want their competitors to know the strategies that they had figured out that worked. They weren't going to be likely to just tell me about it if I called them on the phone and say, let me understand what you do that works so well so I can put it in a book where all your customers and competitors will know what you're doing. I didn't think they'd be very receptive to that. But what I knew was that there was one place where they were very generous in describing what worked for their organization over a variety of situations and even over a variety of eras. And that is in their training programs. If your job as a trainer is to infuse new professionals, aspiring practitioners in your organization with the wherewithal to do a good job and be successful, then you had to give them that information that you had acquired over a long period of trial and error, essentially. I began enrolling in those training programs incognito with disguised identity, disguised intent. I took my seat in their training programs and listened to what they were saying about what worked best and how they managed to make those particular tactics or techniques especially successful. And of course, this was all, as I say, undercover. Then, because I had to do this to be ethical, at the end of these training experiences, when I had gleaned the information I thought was most valuable, I would reveal my identity and say, actually, my name isn't Robert Calden. I'm writing a book about the influence process, and I wanted to learn from you. And I want to be able to get your written permission to use what I've learned in this book. Well, I figured that was going to be a long shot. All the gain would be mine, all the potential risk would be theirs in that particular exchange. I thought I would do something that I had learned from them would be very likely to increase the chance of yes. And that is, I gave them something before I asked for something in return. I said, look, no matter what your answer is to this request I'm about to make to you, here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm writing a book on this, on the influence process, and I learned some things from you. If you will allow me to use this information, I will send you an early copy of the book before any of your competitors get a chance to read it. And you will get the information about what principles of influence work across the whole range of various organizations and industries and practitioners that I found out. So I will give you something. And I was hoping that they would then say, okay, then we'll give you this in return, our approval. But I could see in a lot of faces, I was getting frowns and grimaces. They didn't think that this was a fair trade. Then I said something I didn't even recognize was going to be effective in doing this. I said, in describing this, and this book I'm writing, it will be from my perspective as a university professor who studies the influence process. This is my research area. And I wanted to come to you to learn your strategies. And they looked at me and said, wait a minute. You mean you're a university professor whose area of expertise is persuasion, and we're teaching you? You're our student? And I said, yes. And they would puff up their chests, Michael, wave their hand and say, of course you can use our wisdom.
People are absolutely fascinating. And when you find out the process of how people work, boom, there you go.
They were so flattered. I had given them a reputation of teacher to live up to. Well, what do teachers do? They don't hoard information. They disseminate information. One of the principles of influence is commitment and consistency. If they see themselves as a teacher, that's who they are, that's this reputation I gave them, then to be consistent, they had to say yes to me. I got 100% of the people to give me permission.
When you started that process, Bob, and you're going undercover, so to speak, in the very early stages, was there an initial aha moment? Was there some early experience in this undercover process where you literally were just sitting in your seat, just kind of like bouncing inside going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm learning this right now?
Yes, but it wasn't right away. It was after some time and some sampling of these training programs where the insight was, wait a minute, they're all saying the same things work for them. No matter what profession they're in, no matter what they're offering, what they're selling, what they're urging on their clients or customers, they're all using just 6 universal principles. There's hundreds of different tactics, but you can categorize them in terms of just 6 fundamental tendencies, human tendencies that they were hooking into to get people to say yes to them. And I thought, each one of these will be a chapter in my book. There are only 6. I was shocked and excited by the fact of how small a footprint there was across all these various successful organizations. They were all using one or another of these 6 principles. And that outlined the book for me.
At that point in time, you decide, here you are, you're kind of setting the stage and making a big decision. You did not know at that point in time it would have a big decision or big outcome on society, a big influence on society, so to speak. But you pick 6. You decide this is it. Okay, there could have been 7 or 8. Couldn't there have been? Or was there a debate in you? Or how did you narrow things to 6? Or was it just painfully obvious there were 6?
There were more than 6, but not everybody used them. These were the 6 that everybody used, whose economic livelihood depended on getting others to say yes to them. These were the 6 they all used. So that was the key.
A lot of people have some familiarity with your quite famous book, but let's talk about some of the basics. This word reciprocity, of course, I don't think there's anybody on the planet that gets more credit for this word being understood than you. Reciprocity is so nice, and I think I was lucky enough to kind of learn something about reciprocity before I saw your work, and I just always felt like, well, if I just help that person out and I don't really ask for anything, and I'm genuinely curious about what they're doing, or I think I can help them, and let me just do that. I didn't have a term to apply that. I didn't have a term to associate with that, like reciprocity at the time. But then it's so nice years later to kind of fill in the blanks and backfill with your work. But a lot of people still don't get why it's so important to genuinely want to be able to help another person. Maybe you've got something deep in the dark of your mind where you hope that what you do for that person might get you an advantage, but it might not. But there's a real genuine aspect to reciprocity, because if you're not genuine, that's not really reciprocity.
I really like what you just said. We do some training on the principles of influence, and we always say that there's an ethical approach to this. And the idea about reciprocity is that people give back to you what you first give to them. What we should do when we go into a room is not look around and say, who can help me here? We should look around and say, whom can I help here? Who's available for me to benefit, to really advantage with what I know or what I can do? You just give that. As a side effect, what comes back to you is benefit and advantage that person wants to give, feels obligated to give back to you, or feels grateful to you. And it just flows back automatically. There's no twisting of arms at that point. They just do this. There's this great little study that I saw about the owner of a candy shop in Southern California who did a little experiment. One day, when people came in, half of them would be met warmly by the manager and then escorted over to the candy counter where they could make a choice. The other half were greeted warmly and given a small piece of chocolate and then escorted. Those people were 42% more likely to buy candy. Now you say, well, maybe they just liked the chocolate. Well, if you look closely at the data, the majority of them didn't buy chocolate. They bought something else. Even though they didn't like the chocolate enough to buy it, they felt obligated to do something in return. So it wasn't what they had been given, it was that they had been given something. What I always say is just what you were saying. You start out by being gracious to people. You start out by doing what you can for them. And there are notions of karma and so on. We don't have to get into that, but it just has to do with the way we work as human beings, what we've evolved as a tendency to be sure that we stay in good relationship with the people around us by being sure that we give back if they've given to us.
You're right. I don't want to go off on a tangent with karma. I'm in Southeast Asia, and I have to say, after being in Southeast Asia for 7 or 8 years and learning a little bit about karma, like I said, this is a whole different conversation, but maybe those folks a couple thousand years ago were actually laying the groundwork for your work, Bob.
Well, I mean, I'm certainly going to feel aligned with the basic dynamic that they talk about.
Yeah. It's funny too on reciprocity. So many people, unfortunately, in this world, in this day and age, everyone's always talking about getting paid. Let me get paid. Let me make my money. Okay, yes, everyone has to pay the bills. Everyone wants to have a career. But the basic idea of reciprocity is a very human connection. It's kind of like being friends on the playground, so to speak. So if you can be friends with people, it's amazing what can happen.
I know you talk a lot about investing and so on, but Charlie Munger is a big supporter of the book. He told me that it was that principle of reciprocity that got him hooked enough to read on and read all the other chapters because he saw in it how it had worked for him and on him in business deals that maybe wouldn't have occurred without a sense of reciprocity, or for advantages that flowed to him that wouldn't have flowed without the sense that the partnership was there and people were giving back to those who gave to them.
You bring up Munger, obviously, for the second principle, the idea of liking and commonality. I mean, that's a partnership where there was a whole bunch of liking and a whole bunch of commonality that's lasted for how long has the Buffett-Munger partnership lasted, right? 50 plus years, I think.
I think we're into 53 now.
There you go. You sound like somebody that's maybe been to the shareholders conference at 53. You knew that right off the tip of your tongue.
Well, here's what happened. I didn't know about Berkshire Hathaway after I had written the book. But a few years later, I went to my mailbox and there's a envelope there from Berkshire Hathaway. And I opened it to find a share of Berkshire Hathaway, a stock, and a note from Charlie, who said, by the principle of reciprocity, you should get something for what you've given to us. We've made so much money implementing the lessons in your book. Now, at this time, that share was worth about $75,000. Now it's close to $400,000.
Right there. Amazing reciprocity.
Amazing. The other benefit I've got from it is as I go to the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meetings, I'm a shareholder now. I'm a shareholder. And I get the Berkshire Hathaway letter, Warren's letter at the end of every year where he talks to us, and I can see what he does as a communicator. Not only is he a brilliant investor, he's a brilliant communicator about how to be a brilliant investor.
Maybe I saw a speech somewhere with Charlie Munger talking about your book. I think I did, but I don't recall. But when you said 53, in my mind, I was like, okay, I need to pull on that string because no one says 53 without there being a story behind 53. You didn't say 50 or 51, 53. I was like, okay, there must be more going on here.
I have to admit, it's at least 53. It may not be exactly, but it's at least 53. Yeah.
Let's talk about the third idea, authority. This is such an interesting one where I think you see it across the internet, for example, when people are trying to sell. You see it on Amazon. I mean, Amazon reviews and stuff and endorsements. People know enough about your book. It doesn't make a difference so much if some of the big names are saying something, but authority and getting other people to say something, other people of note, it's really how we work in the modern world, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's a shortcut, isn't it? Through the information overload of modern life. One way we can usually make a good choice is to see what those who are experts, those who are authorities, those who have the credentials and background and experience are saying about this. If we can communicate our message along with a testimonial from somebody who is a legitimate, acknowledged expert in the field, our compliance goes up dramatically.
I find in this day and age also that there's so many people that understand this idea that, okay, we have information overload to begin with. Then we have this shortcut of looking towards authority figures. But my gosh, there's so many authority figures on so many issues today. That also starts to become information overload. So you have to become an expert at discerning what authority figures am I looking at?
That's right. You have to be an expert on experts.
It's true.
But here's the mistake most of us make when we present an idea, let's say on an email or a proposal or something like this. We will wait to present the testimonial later into the body of our message. What I always recommend is to put it at the top so that aura of authority is there for everything we have to say. Right from the beginning, we're getting the grace that comes with a testimonial from an acknowledged authority. Why would we wait to put it at the end or in the middle someplace? I always recommend putting it right up front. If you deserve it, if you've got it, if it's genuine, if it's honest, don't pull your punch.
When I listen to you, and I've listened to you in other places too, and you've been on my show once before, when I listen to you, it's like, okay, if I implement what this man is telling me, I'm making money. I'm making money. I'm increasing my ability to do better with my business. I can only imagine, because you seem very grounded and very calm, and I can only imagine that since these books of yours have come out, and when people hear you, I can only imagine the numbers of corporations and whatnot that would like to have you come participate. Has there been stretches of your life where you have just been on the road so much, or have you kept yourself away from everybody and just done your thing? How have you managed this? Because I would just think so many people, you mentioned the one with Charlie Munger, I would think so many people around the world, because when you start talking, it's different than reading only, because there's a really interesting thing about you. How has that been over the decades, the people wanting you, so to speak?
Yeah, very gratifying that I had a chance to speak to communities and groups of people and even individuals who invite me to come and make a presentation or to do some sort of a consult with them. What's great about it, they're learning experiences for me. The learning doesn't just go one way. I get to hear what works for those individuals and their take on what I'm suggesting and their nuanced examples that may reflect on what I'm saying. It has been something I've had to manage because I'm also an academic, and these days I'm a writer exclusively. I retired from my university positions, but I was traveling so much and I needed to write this new version of influence because, first of all, there's a seventh principle that's in there, but also there was all kinds of updates and new phenomena to talk about that I didn't put in the first editions of it. And I couldn't get the time to do it. And then you know what came along? COVID-19. And just set me in front of my computer. And I got it done. There were no airports. There were no hotels. There were no ballrooms that would constantly pull me away from a focus on that new book.
I think somebody's going to be able to write a book in the future. And as a fellow writer, I can attest to this. But COVID-19, the year of 2020, for writers that took advantage of it, was a once in a lifetime opportunity to focus.
You know what? It was. It was. And there was a little trick I used to make me focus laser-like on this. Because after all, if that's all you're doing, pretty soon it gets burdensome. You start burning out on what you're doing, and you need some pull to bring you back into the work if you've burned out on it after a while. So here's what I did to make sure I was in my seat, in my chair, working every available minute at the highest possible levels. I wrote the dedication for the book to my grandchildren, and then I put a photograph of my grandchildren next to my computer screen, because here was my image. I'm gone. My grandchildren have children. and they go to a library and they find a copy of my book and they take it off the shelf and they show it to their child and they say, "You see this book? My grandfather wrote it for me." Well, Michael, it had better be a good book.
That is a great piece of wisdom. I can't say I've used the exact same technique, versions of it, not as good as that one. That's a fantastic one. But it really gets to the idea that if you're going to do something in life, if you're going to create something, if you're going to write something, if you're going to make something, then I don't want to use bad language, but don't make it half-assed. Go all the way. Make it great.
Right. And every trick in the book that you can use, you're entitled to, because you're not tricking anybody else. You're doing this, you're arranging the circumstances for yourself to take you out of the inconvenience of that moment and into the long-term future where you want to be with that offering.
Before I jump through the rest of the main principles and perhaps touch on the newest one that you write about, you just kind of open up a direction where I could say, okay, what do critics have to say? And if we look at America, so to speak, at the modern age, a lot of people might say, well, gosh, Bob does really cool work and whatnot. But once American politicians on the left and the right get a hold of his work, oh my gosh, that's the wrong way to look at it, because people can go the wrong way on all kinds of things. But I think a genuine, honest person that looks at the principles that you've put together and influence, this is for good. I mean, look at the Charlie Munger example. How do you address this day and age when the politicians, so to speak, get a hold of influence and perhaps they try to use some of these principles in an untoward way, a bad way?
I liked what you were pointing to here, that there is nothing that can't be used for good or ill. If we were to censor ourselves and not produce anything that might lend itself to misuse, we would be frozen. We wouldn't contribute anything. Now, with that said, we still need to, and what we do, one of the things that we do in the speaking and training that we talk about the ethical influence process, how you use these principles in ethically acceptable, in fact, commendable ways. So you can just give those examples and steer away from those examples where people have corrupted the process of exchange and partnership with others and moved into something unethical. Given what you said, anything can be used for good or ill, but we're going to go ahead and we're just going to restrict ourselves to examples of how to do this ethically, how to do it in a morally appropriate way.
Yeah, I concur completely. There's all kinds of bad apples on the planet, and if they want to be a bad apple, that's their choice. The good apple direction is more fulfilling. Social proof is another one of the issues, and the notion of how important it is for peers to feel comfortable and whatnot. But where I really want to go is number 5, 6, and 7, scarcity. This one is so great. I can think of an example. Another investor, a guy named Seth Klarman, kind of a peer of Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger, and he wrote a book years ago called Margin of Safety, and he did a 5,000 copy print run, and that was it. Now he's gone on to become this super, super successful investor out of Boston. But he only did 5,000 copies, and that has become the most collectible book on the world. I mean, most collectible investment book. You go on Amazon, I don't know what the price is today, but it's like there's only 5,000 copies, and he never did another print run. It's not what he does. Speak to this notion of scarcity. It is something where we, especially Americans, we really, and I'm just using the idea of collectible. It's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, scarcity, very powerful. Other animals on the chain, evolutionary chain, react to scarcity in the same way that we do. So it's a very powerful principle. We didn't have to learn it. It's essentially inbred there that we want those things more that are scarce, rare, dwindling in availability. In fact, I saw a couple of studies that showed that, for example, in a supermarket, they did a supermarket chain did an analysis of all the in-store promotions they ever ran to get people to buy particular items off the shelves, signage and that sort of thing surrounding or in front of the shelf or on the shelf that described the product that they wanted. The thing that outdistanced all the others was scarcity, saying limited time only sale or only 3 items per customer. doubled the effect of any other promotion that they had. And I recently saw something, if you want to update this to the internet, there was a study by some researchers who looked at over 6,000 different internet sites, e-commerce sites, that had done A/B tests of various kinds of features within the site that they were studying. The one that had the most effect was limited number of options. And then there was social proof, which was a lot of other people are doing this, are buying this. Look at all the positive reviews and so on. But the third was limited time. You're still getting two of the top three online, just the way you are in the grocery store.
A follow-up on this scarcity notion. Black Friday is now something across the world. Across the world, people don't even have Thanksgiving, but they still have Black Friday, which is really fascinating. I am somebody who has never bought anything on Black Friday. There's going to be some issues in my life where scarcity motivates me. But when it comes to the shopping experience, what do you call these people that can't be influenced by scarcity? None of it moves me, but I know as a business owner, it surely moves clients. I know that. You're 100% correct, obviously, and the proof is there. But what are the people that just have that can't be influenced by scarcity?
I think we all have one or another of those dead spots where there are people who they're not going to be influenced by authorities. They're going to say, nah, I know better than they do. They're not going to be influenced by liking. They're going to say, no, I'll keep emotions out of my decisions. We all have some of that. But that's just a matter of how you were raised or how you were educated or some lessons that you learned early on where things that seemed to be scarce didn't turn out to be that hot. What I would say is you might still be interested in another form of scarcity that is often misunderstood. When I do talk to organizations and talk about the scarcity principle, a lot of times they'll say, but we're not in that position. We have as many opportunities as people want from us. It's not like there's anything limited. What I will say is, here's what you probably do have, otherwise you wouldn't be successful. What is it about your product or service that's unique that nobody else can get unless they come to you? That's what you need to bring to consciousness in your marketing when you want to engage the scarcity principle. It means you have something people can't have unless they come to you. It's a scarce resource.
That's got to be an interesting feeling also in the sense that as you have written about this subject, I mean, who is the other Bob out there? You are the scarce resource when it comes to influence. And that brings me to number 6, which is also applies to you if I look at your career, is you've not tried to be everything to everybody. You have stuck to your knitting, consistency, in public, commitment. I mean, everyone knows you're very consistent, very consistent.
I mean, it's about what I guess is the term that people use now is authenticity, where you look inside yourself and say, what works, what fits with what I prefer to do, what I want to be known for doing, then staying congruent with that so that people recognize that's the case. They know what they're going to get. But also it's the case that people will want to be consistent with what they have said or done so that people can come to me and say, well, you've said this in the past, so tell me, would you be interested in what I have to offer that's entirely aligned with what you've already told me is important for you? That'll hook me. That'll get me to move in that direction when people recognize the power of consistency and how it works on me.
Because you did not become a researcher who hit the ball out of the park, so to speak, who then flipped subjects, went to a different path. Because you do see this with some researchers, some authors, they'll tackle so many different topics over the course of a career. You seemed very comfortable and very knowledgeable that what you had come into, and you gave this great example for your grandkids in writing, is that this is your baby and that you're very comfortable with it and you don't have to be all things to all people, but this one you love.
Well, I think it's because I think I know this domain very well. I really know it inside and out. And it's forever interesting. And there are facets of it that I keep discovering. It's not like I'm trapped in the same quicksand or something like that, where I'm always in there and slowly sinking. There's new things. There are always new examples, but even new dimensions within the principles I'm talking about that's worth revealing and allowing people to benefit from.
100%, because in the sense that I know, okay, I'm going to get Bob for 60 minutes here on this conversation. But if I knew I had no time limit, do you realize how many questions I could ask you? I would not stop. This would go on for a very, very long time because the depth of what you do, and I'm not trying to be fanish or anything, but it's very true. This subject has infinite depth.
Again, I'm a fortunate man having chosen this particular subject for that reason. Yeah.
Let's go into the last one before I have to lose you. A new principle that you put under influence, the notion of unity. Let me let you explain.
Unity is the perception that we share an identity. It's not the same as similarity. For example, sharing tastes or preferences or favorite movie stars or something like that. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who shares an identity with me. So if I were to say, oh, Michael is like us, that wouldn't be it. But if I said, Michael is one of us, all the barriers come down for Michael influencing us now. We're much more receptive because you are of us. There was a little study that was done on a college campus. Researchers had a young woman, a college-age woman, stop people as they were walking down pathways and ask them to contribute to the United Way. And she got a certain number of contributions. If she said one phrase first, contributions more than doubled. And the phrase was, I'm a student here too. Being of them made them more receptive and more favorable. There are various kinds of unities that we can forge between ourselves and other people that create that sense of, oh, we're in the same boat. We share an identity, whatever that might be. If we learn how to do that, we're more successful. Warren Buffett did it in his 50th anniversary letter. He was describing to shareholders why they should continue to hold Berkshire stock and why prospective shareholders should want to buy Berkshire stock. And it was a number of items that were very strong because Berkshire has this very strong case to make. But he said, you know, if you were to ask me whether I felt it was wise to buy Berkshire stock into the future, I'd tell you what I tell my family. In other words, he said, I'm going to bring you into the boundaries of an identity that I share. I'm going to give you information that I would give to people in my family. I read that and I rocked back in my chair. Wow, this guy knows how to use an existing unity, apply it to people who are outside of that unity, and get them to move in his direction.
What's amazing about that too is it's so brief. Sometimes people think they need to be so long-winded about whatever, but here you have an example with Buffett. It's so brief, it's one word, and it says so much.
It strums a string that resonates inside all of us.
Yeah, it's powerful. Again, I could sit here and pull your mind strings for hours and hours and hours, days and days and days. Honestly, it's just such a cool topic. The new and expanded Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. Bob, where would you like to send everybody? If they can't find this book, I think that's a good filter. If they can't find you or the book online somewhere, that's a good filter that maybe this is not for them. All joking. Where would you like to send people to?
Amazon and all the booksellers. But our website, where you can get that and a lot more information, is influenceatwork.com. Influence at Work, all one word, no spaces.com.
Bob, thank you for coming on again. And if there's any other versions in the future, any other embellishments or whatnot, I'm always welcome to have you on anytime. I know you've only got so much time and everybody wants you, but I will always take you. I appreciate it as always.
I will be enthusiastic about it because you ask questions that let me get to the heart of my material.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So long for now.
My guest today is Brett Steenbarger. He is a repeat guest. This is his second visit. Brett is a clinical associate professor of psychiatry at the State University of New York. He's the author of The Daily Trading Coach, The Psychology of Trading and Enhancing Trader Performance. His newest work is Trading Psychology 2.0, From Best Practices to Best Processes. I always enjoy a conversation with Brett, because I truly feel like the kid in the classroom, that everything Brett is going to say or talk about or write about, I have to pause, sit back, think, contemplate. Brett's not just giving the sound bites. There is a tremendous amount of depth behind his thinking and his insights. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Brett Steenbarger. I've seen you make the comment, you're paraphrasing, you're quoting from Bobby Knight, and I'm guessing you must be a fan to some degree. Why do so many of us have the burning desire to succeed, but not the drive to prepare for the success? Before you answer that, I want to add one thing to that. Do people really have that burning desire to succeed?
It's a great question. I do believe the majority of traders go into trading with ideas of success. Now, those ideas may be fantasies, they may be plans, but they're drawn to trading in large part, for the outcomes. The problem that often occurs, and I see this more among beginning traders than experienced ones, is that part of what draws them to trading is the allure of not working a standard 9-to-5 job, and that it seems to them that this could provide relatively easy riches. And of course, as you and I know, it's much more than a 9-to-5 job when you do it right. The fantasy of the easy riches collides with the reality of what you need to do to prepare to win. And I think that creates quite a dissonance for many beginning traders and ultimately leads them to leave the field.
So is it a burning desire more for it's a burning desire for the outcome, but not too many people will take the step back and say, okay, hold on. And maybe you get into it, you say, I just see the outcome. And then you get into it and you take a step back and you start to break these pieces apart and you say, hold on, we can't just focus on the outcome or we will go crazy. We must break this down. We must look more at our process. Why don't you talk about that? Because I've seen you in some of your recent work, and I would love for you to draw some distinctions here from process to practice to process. Break that apart in how you're describing to clients and people that read and follow your work.
If I can address the earlier point, which I think is a good one, the distinction I like to make is between those who have a self-proclaimed passion for trading and those who have an enduring passion for markets. Those two are very different, and the person with the passion for trading wants to trade and ultimately ends up over trading. But when markets are closed, there's nothing to generate passion. That's very different than the person who has a passion for markets, where it's more of that process interest of understanding, unraveling, reverse engineering what's going on in markets and figuring out ways to better exploit that. So I think those are very different motivations and end up with very different consequences for traders. Your second question about practice and process, to me, is essential. And that's really what one of the big factors that got me to write this latest book of mine, The Trading Psychology 2.0. So often you hear traders talk, and again, I see it more with the beginning traders. You see traders talk about finding your edge, sticking to your edge. All well and good. However, that, of course, doesn't take into account the reality that markets are ever changing and that finding your edge is a continual process, that as markets change, edges, sources of edge, evolve. And so we always have to be evolving ourselves. The way that happens in the medical world, where I came from, is through identification of best practices. What are the practices that lead to the best outcomes? And then turning those best practices into robust processes so that the best practices become habit patterns. They become automatic. I think that analogy in evidence-based medicine is quite apt for trading. We want to find the drivers of our success, what makes us successful, and turn those into processes that become replicable.
I'm going to break apart some of the big picture issues in your current life, your current world, your current work. But as you mentioned, markets always changing. And one of the lessons that you talk about in being around so many traders, studying, teaching, training, is adaptability. And literally from the beginning, if one strategy is not predicated on being adaptable to the markets, and the markets are the driver. We can't control the markets. And so whatever the markets must do, and they will do something, adaptability is number one, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. A great recent example that I've written about is in your area of expertise, Mike, and that's trend following. Trend following, as it occurred in the late 1990s, is quite different from trend following right now. There are portfolio managers and traders I work with who are trading trends, who are trying to identify trends to trade, but the way they are executing on their trend trading is more similar to what happened in the late 1990s, where they are confusing, I would say, trend with momentum. So that if they're long, they're buying strength. If they're short, they're selling weakness. What we've seen recently are markets that show anti-momentum in the short run, even as they are trending. A different way of saying that is that the trends have a lower Sharpe ratio. How you implement a trend-following approach requires adaptability. You may stick to your basic orientation to markets, i.e., trend following, but how you make that happen, how you put it into practice, has to be based on outcomes and your study of markets. That's where the adaptability comes in.
You know, it's an interesting point that you bring up, and it gets even more complicated as the numbers of large funds that we all read about, that we see the headlines, we see the quotes from, trying to decipher. You know, when you read about a large fund that's managing billions and billions of dollars, and let's say that they started off as a trend following fund, and perhaps they still have billions and billions of dollars still as a pure trend following trader. But there are many funds today where they're adding other things and they're adding other strategies. That raises up a whole different issue, which is really one, in my humble opinion, not really of markets, and it's more a result of clients. Because when I talk to the pro trend following traders, if you talk to them on the record for public consumption, they're going to talk about a certain way, and it really is an appeal to clients. You get them off the record, when the microphones turn off, they're just like, oh my gosh, it's such a pain in the neck to deal with clients that don't understand our strategy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And And I think for a fund, diversification makes sense and having multiple approaches. And so there may be trend following approaches and there may be relative value approaches and so forth and so on. I think having diversified sources of return is a good thing for investors. One of the things, though, I've seen in the fund world is that investors have very limited appetite for the downside. And I would say that's been true ever since the '08 debacle, that they want to see funds make money. They don't want to see funds lose money. And so funds are managing risk much more tightly than in the past. So that even though in name they may be trend followers, in fact, any wiggles against the trend, that lower Sharpe ratio that I mentioned, ends up getting them out often at the worst possible times. So that sometimes it's the business pressures and the pressures of risk management that make it difficult for a trader to implement their strategy.
I would also advise clients or people that are interested in a subject like trend following. We're going to talk about a lot of different aspects of trading psychology today, but sometimes the performance proof, you can go to those track records. Those track records often have remarkably insightful data about them. And you can look at those track records, and I can think of some names, and you look at those track records and you say, wow, they've stuck to their religion, so to speak, for decades. Then you can look at some others and you say, you know what? A very consistent return number every month is just not trend following, even though it might be advertised that way. So I think it's really incumbent on individuals to do their homework and really try and find out, because sometimes the public pronouncements don't match the performance data.
It's a great point. And one of the downsides of having so much computing power and software power right now is that it's relatively easy to backtest strategies. With enough iterations, you can find randomly a strategy that will look good not only on the back test, but on out-of-sample performance. So it looks like a very smooth, wonderful, ideal P&L curve, but of course that doesn't match the reality of real-time returns.
You do bring up a good point, though, about the back testing. I mean, back testing and trying to, if you're in the systems world of some type of system, right, a back test, that's where it all starts. And I'd like for you to lead this into a broader subject area, which is preparation, because so much of elite performance really starts at that research level, that preparation level, that back test level. And the ultimate execution often can be very quick or can occur in a fast manner, but it's all that prep time, that real deliberate practice is where the gold is made, so to speak.
I think so. And as I mentioned in the Trading Psychology 2.0 book, the key in performance fields is that elite performers, spend more time in preparation than in actual competitive performance. That there's a lot of practice time that goes into the curtains being raised on the Broadway play. There's a lot of practice time that goes into the first game of a chess tournament. And that preparation works at two different levels. It helps develop a strategy, an approach, and it helps prepare the performer mentally, psychologically, emotionally. That preparation time, I found, is correlated with success to the degree that it pushes the trader to expand their horizons and develop the best of what they're doing.
Let's just talk about pro traders for a moment. You've seen pro traders at the highest levels. Why don't you draw some contrasts? For example, I think the audience might have a hard time imagining that there are some pro traders at the highest levels, perhaps, maybe with long track records, perhaps a lot of money under management, and the way they go about practice might not be nearly as good as one of their peers who might have deliberate practice down to a science. Everything is really thought out. There's some contrast, even at the highest levels, isn't there?
Very much so. I'm really blessed by being able to work with a number of very talented traders and very successful firms. In fact, the smallest firm that I work with has about $3 billion under management. So, traders in those kind of firms have to do something right and have to have some real strengths to get to that point of managing significant capital. But you're right, even within those funds, between PMs, there are real differences in the preparation approach. And I would say there are two sources of difference. One is the one that you mentioned, the difference between repeated experience and deliberate practice. Some managers of money, some traders really rigorously keep score, and they try to learn from their trading. And what did I do wrong? What could I improve? How am I going to improve it tomorrow, next week? So they're constantly keeping score, setting goals, and then keeping score about whether they reach those goals or not. That's the essence of deliberate practice. The second thing that distinguishes the successful traders is the emphasis on what they do right, their strengths. What positive psychology research is telling us is that it's leveraging our strengths, not just shoring up weaknesses, that accounts for elite performance. And so we want to figure out, what are we doing well? Because those are the practices that will anchor our best processes. And so in two different respects in preparation, identifying what we're doing wrong, correcting that rigorously, identifying what we're doing right, and turning those into best practices, that is real preparation.
I only brought it up because it was in your work most recently, but deliberate practice, I'm my fingers crossed. Anders Ericsson has said he will come on in 2016 to talk about his seminal work. So I look forward to that. Let me drive back at the strengths aspect for a moment. So let's say we're kind of giving advice to the new trader at the table to some degree. And let's say we're kind of talking more of a system mindset. And I think these days, most everything is a system to some degree. I mean, even if it's a discretionary type thinking, there's a system behind it. But talk about strengths, because it seems like to me, one doesn't really have the ability to think too much about the strength they have. Let's say you're going to be a systems trader. As a systems trader, you have to have your entry exit criteria. You have to know how you're going to manage your portfolio. What's the risk management strategy? You can't just leave one out. So I would love for you to kind of elaborate more on the strengths part, because it seems like you're saying, and I could be reading this wrong, that we all have there's some built-in strength about one aspect, and to kind of really focus on, correct me, what am I missing here?
Well, no, I don't think you're missing anything. I do believe that the strengths that make a good systems trader are different from the strengths that make a good discretionary trader. So much of the success of systems pertains to the research and the quality of the research that's conducted. And so in some ways, the strengths that are relevant to a system trader are not so different from the strengths that are relevant to a medical researcher. The information you take in, how you process that information, how many variables you look at one time, and how you weight those are all part of what can be best practices. There are also strengths interpersonally. Many times the research is too complex to be conducted individually. I work with some people who develop relatively high frequency systems. And those systems are developed in teams. There are programmers, there are quants, there are traders. And so being able to work well with others, those are strengths that are very relevant to best practices and to ultimate outcomes in the systems world. For discretionary traders, strengths are different and often pertain to the amount and type of information that's taken in, how that information is translated into tradable ideas, how those ideas are expressed as positions and managed as positions, including the risk management. And of course, there are best practices related to not only risk management and position management, but self-management, how we take care of ourselves. All of those go into making someone successful. There's no one process of trading. Trading consists of multiple intersecting processes.
I brought something up a few minutes ago. I talked about some of the big things that you've learned from all the traders that you've looked at. I mentioned adaptability, creativity, productivity, and self-management. Why don't you talk about creativity for a moment? I have a feeling for many traders, just even entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, creativity for those that are in the business, they probably think of it as instinctive. It's something I do all the time. But defining creativity like you've done changes the ballgame a little. It forces us to think about the word creativity. And I don't necessarily know that a lot of people would immediately think, oh, I have to be creative to be a trader.
Yes, to the degree that we regard trading as a business, then I think it makes sense to say we have to be doing something unique in order to be superlatively successful at this business. If I open a hamburger stand that's just like every other hamburger purveyor, then how am I going to achieve a significant degree of economic success? I have to do something different, unique. And it's in that difference, that uniqueness, that creativity comes into play. We see that in financial markets because many times the herd is following a similar set of strategies, looking at the same information and processing it the same way. And that's why you see swings in sentiment that often end up being relatively good contrary measures. That's why you see many people getting hurt at the relative tops and bottoms of markets, because they are doing things that really are not unique, not creative. It's particularly an issue in the professional money management world, where there tends to be a high correlation among financial markets. The Financial Times had a piece on that recently. There also, as a result, tends to be a high correlation of returns among portfolio managers within a firm and across firms. And so that is a problem for investors. Investors want to diversify their capital. A trader who has the creativity to examine, test, and implement new strategies is going to be very appealing to anyone who invests and wants that diversification.
You know, you just mentioned, you said, well, clients want the diversification. And we talked earlier about, sometimes clients actually, they might say they want diversification, but then they're doing anything they can to avoid volatility, to avoid taking excess risk. And I was thinking, as you were just talking about, okay, so many investors, traders, they're looking at the same info. They're processing that information in the same way. There's nothing unique about it. And they're simply fixated on comfort. And as you point out in your work, it's the adaptation. It's got to hurt a little, the hurting a little, or maybe even hurting a lot. That's where the reward often is, in some kind of perverse sort of way. That desire for comfort can set one up for, as Nassim Taleb talks about so much, the black swan. So comfort's often illusion, isn't it?
I agree with you, and it's hard to imagine us extending our boundaries, really transcending who we are, if we aren't willing to go outside our comfort zone. That can be done in a variety of ways. It can be done by looking at new markets. It can be looking at existing markets in new ways. It could be looking at new and different time frames for implementing our trading. There are many ways of doing things new and different. One example from my own recent trading, it has been a redefinition of volatility. I find that volatility is very important to market returns. And in the models that I create, volatility ends up being an important variable. As we know, with stocks in particular, volume and volatility are highly correlated, so that markets move more when there's more participation, which makes sense. But I got it in my head, well, what if I looked at volatility a different way? What if I looked at the volatility of a given amount of volume in the market? If X number of shares trade or X number of contracts trade in the market, how much movement is associated with that amount of volume? You're disaggregating the relationship between volume and volatility, which I call pure volatility. And it turns out that that has real value as a variable for understanding markets. Because when you see volume expanding. And when you see the movement per unit of volume expanding, you can get some very big moves. That's an example of creativity, looking at something similar in a unique way.
We've been talking about markets, how markets are the drivers. But at the end of the day, yes, markets are the drivers. We as individuals have certain built-in, and I want to kind of let you break this apart. We've got a certain personality. We've come to the game with something. We behave in a certain way. We think in a certain way. We react in a certain way. Our emotions go a certain direction. But I find the word personality is often difficult. And I know you point out, and correctly so, and Jack Schwager has said it for a long time. He said, you got to trade your personality. But I think for a lot of people listening, that might be really hard to digest. You say, well, hold on. I don't necessarily even know how to define my personality in any kind of a rigid or quantifiable way. One could go out. There's several personality tests out there, or personality instruments, shall I say, since I am actually qualified to administer the Myers-Briggs instrument. It's not a test. So, but that can be confusing, and there can be debates about that. So why don't you break apart the word personality from your perspective and give some guidance to the audience out there that's thinking, man, I might not even be sure what my personality is. And if I do know, how do I make the decision to go which direction? It becomes a quite complicated conundrum to figure out, doesn't it?
Yes, I agree with you. And I think it's even more complex than your question implies, because as you mentioned earlier, it's not just personality traits. It's also our cognitive style, how we think about things. We have personality traits, emotional traits, we have cognitive traits. And so we want to leverage our strengths in both of those domains. Again, I think that reverse engineering the success of our trading can provide some real clues as to some of those strengths, some of those signature personality and cognitive strengths that would contribute to our success. What I found from the research I've done with traders is that average holding period ends up being a very important variable, particularly on the cognitive side. I would make a distinction psychologically between a trader and an investor. The longer time frame necessitates a higher degree of underlying research, and the longer term research becomes really the focus of the trading of the market participation, not the day-to-day movements of the underlying assets. That's a very different set of strengths from, let's say, the day trader, the active day trader, who is looking at markets moving rapidly, is seeing patterns set up very quickly in markets and trading those patterns. So there's very little explicit research, reading, calculation. It's all about fast pattern recognition. The distinction that has been made between thinking fast and thinking slow is very relevant there. The deeper thinking, the faster pattern recognition. And as Kahneman talks about, those are really two different brain functions and two different modes of processing information. Now, in addition to that, we could distinguish two types of trader or investor, personality-wise. One is highly risk-taking. They tend to be more outgoing, more extroverted. They tend to be more stimulation-seeking, more aggressive, and are willing to take more risks in the pursuit of higher returns. The second group of traders is less interested in absolute returns than in risk-adjusted returns. They're less risk-taking. They're seeking smoother P&L curves, higher Sharpe ratios, and very often are seeking what we would call alpha rather than beta. They tend to be more analytical in their cognitive style. They tend to be more introverted in their personality style, and so a very different approach to markets. Those two dimensions, the holding period, the research orientation versus pattern recognition orientation, and the element of risk seeking versus risk-adjusted return seeking are just a few ways people could think about personality and cognitive style and how that might relate to some of their strengths.
Brett, I know your job is not necessarily to offer a personal opinion about what I'm going to ask you, but I'm curious because you just mentioned the phrase smoother curves. And if I think back over the last 15 years, we've had two, if an investor, if they classify themselves as an investor, just to kind of a buy and hold approach, an index type approach, we've had two 50% drawdowns in the S&P. I think it's reasonable to assume that if that's one strategy to trust the S&P, it's reasonable to assume that could happen again. And now, of course, when it comes to trading strategies like trend following, a smoother curve. If somebody says they want to be a trend following trader and they want a smooth curve, I would say, well, then you've got the wrong strategy. There's no such thing. But is there really a smooth curve for anybody except, as you mentioned earlier, and you didn't say this, but the pro high frequency traders that can generate? I think I read a couple years ago, one of the big iBanks, is literally they made money every day of one quarter. So, but I don't even know if that's trading. That's technology, that's infrastructure, that's access. That's not a competitive thing where I can compete against JP Morgan on the high frequency level. I can't. But talk about that for a second. The idea of a smoother curve. Is that just a false ideal, a false goal?
Not at all. Not at all. I think for any one strategy, the P&L curves are likely to be bumpy. And as you point out with the S&P, for instance, if one were simply an index trader. However, the idea of smoothness of P&L curves is really all about diversification, portfolio construction, and combining different approaches to markets to balance the returns. The basic risk parity notion of buying a volatility-weighted basket of interest rate instruments and equity instruments would be a case in point that in recent years, that basket has had a smoother P&L curve than either asset individually. You could expand that more broadly to a basic asset management approach. For instance, if you think about returns as being generated by certain factors, trend or momentum could be one factor, value could be one factor, carry could be another factor, then you can combine investments or trades that express those different factors and that harvest returns from those factors in a smoother way than if you were trading one strategy in isolation. And so asset management in general as a field, I think, is all about achieving smoother returns, more unique returns, rather than chasing beta from any given market.
Yeah, I was definitely just speaking to one strategy. I think of course, you're right. Once you add in multiple strategies, the notion of trying to find a smooth curve is that's the goal. That's what many people do, I guess. But in the notion, I think if some people think they can find a smooth equity curve from just one strategy in isolation, that might be very difficult.
I agree with you. Probably the Bible of the asset management world would be Antti Ilmanen's book, Expected Returns, and very much worth reading about, because I do think that there are things that individual traders can do to improve the smoothness of their returns. Even as you say, they can't completely smooth them. There's always going to be those bumps in the road. A very simple example would be trade expression, that a given view in a given market may have more favorable risk reward if traded with an option structure than if traded with an asset outright. There are ways, I think, of achieving better risk reward, but that doesn't eliminate the potholes along the way.
for all of these, and we're not necessarily defining strategy here at the moment, but regardless of what one strategy is, talk about the emotional buy-in. If there's no real emotional buy-in, success is just never going to happen, is it?
Well, it's a very good point. And the emotional buy-in occurs because the trading approach or the investment approach is genuinely yours. You have researched it. You have thought about it. It springs from your creativity. It springs from your work. And it's the time and effort generated that generates the strategy that helps you understand it and believe in it. That's why it is perilous to borrow trading strategies from others, because at the end of the day, you're really not trading your strategy, and it's unlikely you will have the conviction to stay in that strategy during those inevitable periods of drawdown.
Well, of course, you're talking to a guy that wrote a little book on the turtles, and I think some of them would say it's nice to have a head start. And I think it's kind of it's a multifaceted point, really, which is if you take a strategy, if somebody gives you a strategy and you don't understand it, and you're just going to follow it like a black box and just trust the signal that comes out, that's death. You're not going to make it. However, we all have to learn from somebody. We have to start somewhere. So if you can get a head start, if you can move down the path, as long as you understand what's going on, of course, that's how we all learn. So it's kind of a several layers there to that topic, huh?
Yeah, I love that point, and it's really about mentorship. And I see a lot of good mentoring at the firms where I work. You're right. In the very beginning, when you have a junior trader who is working at the side of a senior trader, it starts with a head start. It starts with the junior trader mimicking the trading of the more senior trader. And just like in the old days, the beginning painters mimicking the brushstrokes of the masters. That's what mentoring is all about in the earliest phases. And it is a head start, as you point out. It's over time, as people make their own unique observations of markets and adapt their trading to their strengths, they start to develop their own style and begin to express that approach to trading in their own manner. To take the example we've been talking about, someone may learn at the feet of the master trend following, and over time may implement it in new and different markets, may implement it on different time frames, may implement it on relative price movement rather than absolute. There would be many ways to make the strategy one's own over time and develop that conviction that helps people stay in the strategy once it's theirs.
Let's talk about the notion of a checklist and ultimately moving that towards a flow chart. Something concrete. I mean, it's a standard operating procedure. I mean, really, and if people are listening to you, I asked you the question about personality. Your personality as you talk is your work. I mean, anybody with a pulse would read your book and then listen to this podcast and they'd be like, okay, those are both Brett. Those are both Brett. I mean, there's you just know we're dealing with the same person. As my mother had read my books and she said, okay, that's you. I can tell that's you. But talk about the notion of a checklist, because in your personality, that I have a feeling just is simpatico. It's natural for you. It might not be so natural for other people. Or am I wrong? Was it natural for you, the checklist?
No, I wouldn't say it was natural, and I think that for me it was part of an evolution. I think that's true for many people. When Atul Gawande wrote the book, The Checklist Manifesto, he wrote it, I think, because he saw that checklists were not standard operating procedure for most people, and yet they worked remarkably well for airline pilots, for surgeons, and so forth. And so the idea of a checklist is to figure out those best practices. What are you supposed to be doing when you perform well? And you codify that in a list. And you don't perform, you don't risk your capital unless you do A, B, C, D, and E. Over time, you may discover new and different best practices, and so your checklist will evolve. But it's a way of grounding yourself so that once again, those best practices turn into habit patterns. They turn into processes.
Brad, how many traders do you get that come across you for the first time? Maybe they've engaged you, maybe it's just casual conversation, and they've got so much excitement. And maybe that excitement is an unbridled excitement. It's not necessarily focused. They're focused on the outcome. Your personality probably does a very good job of calming people down. And if they can't calm down and take it to a checklist type scenario, it's probably a pretty good self-reflection of saying, hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't for me.
Yes. And again, a good point. Many people are trading implicitly for action, for thrills, for there's nothing worse for them than a quiet market. That approach to trading really rubs against the grain of being more process focused and keeping checklists. So that I like people to be passionate about what they do. I like them to be excited about their work and about what they discover and what they trade in markets. But ultimately, you want them doing what works best. A great example in baseball history, of course, that you know about is Ted Williams and how he diagrammed the strike zone and determined his batting average for every possible location of a pitch, so that he knew where a pitch would have to appear on the plate for him to have the best odds of getting a hit. That's what people do when they develop best practices and checklists. They figure out what they do best, and they turn that into a set of routines.
Brett, I have one more thing I wanted to bring up with you today. I forgot to bring it up earlier. It's not really intertwined in our conversation. It's more on the outside, but I think, frankly, once one understands it, it's on the inside. And that's the notion of fitness. And I'm talking about physical fitness. I think we can all think back to some article we read in our youth, or we saw a picture. Maybe there was a trader or a very successful person, and they just carried in their public pictures an appearance that was clearly not healthy. And sometimes I think maybe even as a young man, I would say, okay, well, I keep myself healthy, but you might be thinking, well, it's not important. And I think overall, though, that even if you can think to the example of somebody, oh, that guy, he made hundreds of millions of dollars and he's really overweight and doesn't care about fitness. That's the wrong connection. That's the wrong way to look at it. Why don't you talk about health and fitness and perhaps even add in a little bit of your views on yoga and the moment of now?
Great questions. The research in psychology tells us that a positive emotional experience is associated with superior processing of information. It's associated with superior productivity. It's associated with superior creativity. Maximizing our positive experience in general is a way of preparing ourselves for trading performance. Part of that is our physical preparation, our energy level. Eating is part of that. Sleeping well is part of that. Physical exercise is part of that. Using yoga or meditation to help increase our focus and to help us stay calmly focused is part of that. The training that we do on the physical side, on the personal side, ends up fueling positive emotional experience, and that ends up giving us greater focus, concentration, energy level in our trading. I would say the same thing, not only of exercise, but of the quality of our personal relationships. That maximizing our positive experience from those ultimately fuels our energy level, and that ultimately fuels our trading.
Brad, it's cool stuff. We could talk forever. I could just sit here and pick up ideas and pick up questions, and we could just keep going. The book is out. Where can we send people? Where's the best place we can send people to check you out and your assorted books? All highly recommended. If you've not bought them, then there's something wrong with you.
Well, the nice thing is plenty of stuff online for people to check out, and they can decide if
you've given so much stuff for free away over the years. I mean, checking out your blog and stuff, that's a wealth of information. So
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's really where it starts, is with the Trader Feed blog. That's Trader Feed, all one word, TraderFeed.blogspot.com. I post to that daily. And then I'm writing a blog also most recently for Forbes. You could check out by Googling Forbes, Brett Steenbarger. And then, of course, the most recent book that I alluded to earlier, Trading Psychology 2.0, is available at a discounted price on Amazon, and really puts together, I think for the first time, puts together positive psychology research, recent psychology research, and what that specifically means for trading performance. That's what got me excited about that book. That might be worth checking out.
Even though it's about trading, I mean, we could really take out the phrase trading and your work could apply to just about any discipline.
I think that's very, very true. Trading happens to be the playing field that I've chosen and others have chosen. But in fact, the principles of performance are common across disciplines. Ultimately, we pursue the disciplines that speak to us.
Brett, hopefully you will come on again in the future and educate my audience, educate me. I think my blood pressure goes down just talking to you. I can't get as excited as I normally might be.
I wish it was that way for my kids.
Brett, thank you. Take care.
Okay, thanks so much, Mike. Great stuff.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.